Why is this movie called Milo's Return? Or shouldn't it be called Atlantis? Shouldn't it just be called Atlantis Returns?
That would actually be a decent title,
Right? Because the
but
whole movie is about essentially bringing Atlantis back to the surface level. Milo's already
well, I'll,
in
I'll, I'll I'll throw
Atlantis.
this back at you. The movie's actually about nothing.
And we are here again, and we are back again. As always, I'm Matt.
I'm Drew.
And this is the Sequel Podcast, where we break down movies from the past and see if they need to exist. Right now, we're focusing on Disney animated sequels. So there's a bunch of movies we all love, that we all know from our past. But did you know that they made, often, at times, 3 sequels to those movies? Well, we're breaking down the most interesting ones and seeing what's good about them, what's bad about them. Do they need to exist? Are they just grabbing money? Or do they actually bring something to the franchise? And unfortunately, the next movie on the list, which we just finished and watched, is Atlantis 2, Milo's Return. Before we jump into it, Drew, what is your history with the first Atlantis? Atlantis, The Lost Empire.
I've seen this movie multiple times. I watch it every couple of years. So I've seen it probably 5 times.
Yeah, you like that movie a lot.
I know it has a lot of flaws, but I'll say this: I think it was probably one of the riskiest movies that Disney has made to date.
I definitely had higher hopes for this sequel. I don't know if you did.
I definitely had higher hopes.
Yeah.
And it was I think I had more expectations for this movie than I had for a lot of the other ones on the list, because I believe this is the only movie on the list where I liked the original and hadn't seen the sequel.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a lot of expectations and was disappointed.
All right, so let's go through this plot first. So this is Atlantis. Milo returns. So the movie opens on 2 fishermen at sea, and they're fishing, and they're French, and they're talking about nothing, and then the Kraken attacks, and then we jump to Kita in Atlantis. We're kind of picking up where we left off. She's doing a huge exposition dump. It's almost like, in case you missed Atlantis, The Lost Empire, let's catch you up to speed on what is going on. Here's my ship. Here's my pet animal rock lava thing. And we're going through the city.
We'll call it Lava Dog.
Lava Dog. And we're going through the city. She's given just all this exposition about her father and how they got here and how they saved the city and, blah, blah, blah. Milo has been in the city this whole time. He's got a little shoulder tattoo now. He's got his little sash. He is not played by Michael J. Fox this time around.
In this movie, he is played by James Arnold Taylor, who is best known for playing Obi-Wan in the animated Clone Wars TV show.
Is that true?
That is true.
Good for him. Yeah. So, after we establish Kita and Milo in Atlantis, giving us our big exposition dump, the crew returns. The crew from the first one, Milo's crew. So we think that the crew's here just to check up on Milo, but then we reveal that they're here to tell Milo and to tell Kita that there was a Kraken attack at sea by some Frenchmen, and Kita thinks that Kraken is like an Atlantis weapon that they have to go after and stop. So we go off on our first mission. We're on a boat. As soon as they're on the boat to go find the Kraken shows up. They go to fight it with these ships that shoot into the water, but Milo and Kita's ship has trouble firing off, so then they just start sinking into the bottom of the ocean. But then the crew shows up in the nick of time right before they're about to get eaten by the Kraken. So they go to a town where the Kraken is known for. I believe it's even called Krakenstan. They meet an old guy named Volgood. He's all creepy. He runs the town. He offers them a place to stay and says he'll take them to the boat repair place the next day to repair their boat. So anyway, the crew walks into some fog and they're investigating the town. They slide down the side of a cliff. Nothing really happens. They return to the town the next day or that night. They see Volgood. They think he's up to some activities. They follow him, and then we reveal that Volgood is working with the Kraken in some kind of cave in which the Kraken is destroying ships, very similar to the first ship that we saw get destroyed by it, and is collecting supplies and items, and then is slowly coming to this cave and delivering the items with its tentacle to Volgood. And we believe at the time that Volgood has the Kraken and all these employees possessed to do a goods supplies run, which is pretty ridiculous. And while they're there...
And we are 30 minutes into the movie at this point.
Yeah, and while they're there, Audrey, who is like the Michelle Rodriguez of the group, she gets possessed by the Kraken, and the crew starts to fight the Kraken to save her, and they do. But then as they're like kind of floating away in their ships, the explosion guy, Vinny, gets possessed, and then he starts like trying to attack the crew who's trying to attack the Kraken, and there's just this big miscommunication. And then we slowly reveal that it's not Volgood that's possessing the Kraken, it's the Kraken that's possessing everybody to do deeds. So I guess the Kraken wants the supplies when it's all said and done, because he's the one putting the supplies in the cave and everyone's working for him. Basically, they defeat the Kraken by firing at the broken ship from earlier that Milo and Keto were in. And then after they defeat the Kraken, it just disappears. And then Volgood and all the people that were possessed, they just go back to normal. And it's kind of awkward because after we defeat the Kraken, we go, well, what's the movie about now?
There's no longer what could be called a plot.
So we're at 30 minutes and we defeat the villain.
Yes, and it's very jarring.
And this is what we find out. So we cut to dinner, and Milo says, like, oh, we got to go back to Atlantis, me and Kita. And everything seems
Milo's return, as it were,
yeah.
back to Atlantis.
Well, we'll get to that, why it's even called that. But so Milo and Kita said, we got to go back to our place. And everyone, it just seems like the movie's about to end. But then the old lady with the microphone at the end of the table says, there's trouble somewhere else. There's reports about another attack with something else. And we have to go to the southwest. And then what happens is we immediately cut to the southwest. Mm-hmm. So now the crew is in a different location, almost like a desert. And the villain in this new location, the southwest, is the rumor of these sand coyote tornadoes, these tornadoes that are full of sand coyotes, which Kita believes is like another Atlantean thing potentially. I don't really know. They find some device in this town that like signals that. But
there's some cowboys.
Yada yada yada. Okay.
There's a lot of yada 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 in this movie.
Yada yada yada. They meet a ghost traveler who's like a Native American. He leads them to a cave in which we reveal is this lost city that no one knew about. And apparently Kita's father came to this location, gave his magical crystal to all these cultures like the Mayans, the whatever, and that is the reason why they have been able to have their civilizations, because of this Atlantis king that kind of gave them knowledge and gave them kind of stuff. So once the traveler, the Native American ghost coyote man, once he understands who Kita is, he pretty much just likes her, respects her, he lets them go.
That's when the movie ends for the second time.
Yes.
Now we'll get into the third ending.
So after they do the second mission, we go back home and have another dinner where
there's another dinner
where the old guy, it might not be dinner, but the old guy, they're like, hey, we got to go back.
Oh, no, it wasn't dinner. They were just at his house. They were saying goodbye for the second time because this was when they were going to do Milo's return.
So they go to Whitmore's house. They're going to leave again. And then Whitmore just casually reveals, he goes, oh, yeah, and by the way, we had a break-in last night. And then Milo's like, well, tell me about this break-in. And he reveals that someone stole his spear. Now, this story is where, at least for me, it gets really, really weird. Because during this explanation of Whitmore telling him about someone breaking into his house, he tells a story about an old man that was a rival to him. And this man's name was Eric. And eventually, this man, Eric, found a lost city that he eventually called Asgard. And he started then, through this delusion of finding the city, he started to self-name himself Odin, the king of Asgard.
Thinking that he was Odin.
Well, either way, this third mission is essentially about a crazy man who believes that he is Odin. He believes that he is set to start off or initiate Ragnarok.
With this spear, which is called Gungnir.
Gungnir, that's the spear that he steals off Whitmore's wall. So once Milo realizes that this guy is pretending to be Odin, that he's going to start Ragnarok and destroy Asgard, it's like, okay, I guess...
We'll destroy the world.
We'll destroy the world, yeah, but it's like... It's the exact plot of Thor Ragnarok.
Well, that's Ragnarok.
That's Ragnarok.
Ragnarok is the apocalypse.
So someone mentions like, oh, we got to go to Iceland. So what do you think happens? Cut to, we're in Iceland.
Oh yeah, there's no transition. There's no subs. There's no journey.
So we go to Iceland. Once they get there, they basically just get frozen and they teleport to the Hall of Odin, aka Eric.
They don't teleport. There is a cut where it is implied that they are transported.
Oh yeah, okay. So they get frozen, they get transported to the Hall of Odin, aka Eric, and even more so to get into kind of this Marvelverse stuff. Eric thinks that Milo is like Loki and that he's there to deceive him, and he immediately attacks him. And even more than that, he thinks that Kida is Brumhilda and like leader of the Valkyrie. After we get to see Eric, aka Odin, doing his thing, he separates the crew while Kida wakes up now in the Brumhilda outfit,
Valkyrie
the Valkyrie outfit, and he's calling her Brumhilda. Yeah. He's talking about how he's going to summon Ragnarok. Around that time, the crew finds a way to escape, and Kida sees that they're free, so she, tries to distract Odin, aka Eric, to, the lava tunnel where they're going to go do Ragnarok. So basically, they go to the volcano area, or where the lava is. Milo and crew try to stop Odin. He basically gets successful. He summons the fire god. The fire god ends up taking the spear during a scuffle of some kind. And then now we have our two big villains, which is this ice monster that also exists in this world that the crew had to fight earlier to get past. And now we have this fire monster. So the ice and the fire monster both hold on to the spear. They're trying to cause Ragnarok and trying to cause destruction of the world. The crew basically just uses fire and ice to defeat both the monsters, and the monsters turn on each other. They defeat themselves, and Kida gets the spear back. She returns to Atlantis with Milo.
Milo's return,
I guess, finally.
It all comes back around.
So they return the spear. And then Kida decides to do another Marvel reference by doing a Black Panther, which is, we're going to share the crystal with the whole world. No longer will we be hidden. So then you cut to these two fishermen on sea. All of a sudden things start to shake. Atlantis rises to the top. During that process, they almost kill those fishermen in the process. But Atlantis rises to the top. You got this little baby Atlantis girl that's like, what's that, mama? And she's like, that's the sun. And then she does like a stupid little like giggle. And that's the end. Yeah, and then that's the end of the movie. And then Atlantis is now up above sea level, no more secrets. And that's the movie. And I gotta tell you, as exhausted as it was just rereading that plot synopsis, it was even more exhausting watching it.
It's three different movies.
It's three different movies.
I wanna interject something real quick because I'm doing some quick research right now. But it looked like they had a TV show in development. Ooh. That they had some scripts maybe written, but nothing more than that. The TV show is going to be called Team Atlantis. And it was going to deal with other kind of like they have a Loch Ness Monster referenced here, and just like other kind of like urban legends or kind of fantasy, like modern fantasy kind of storylines that they were going to explore.
That's a really good point, because this movie feels like the scripts that they had written for the show never gets greenlit. So they go, well, we have these scripts. Can we just take the three like best stories and turn it into a movie? And I think even more so that's the case, because when we get to the credits of this movie, there's 3 directors and there's 8 writers. And one of those 3 directors, interesting enough, since we started this podcast, is Tad Stones.
Yeah.
Who directed the third Aladdin, King of Thieves. So he's one of the directors of this. You got 3 directors. And it just feels like this movie is not a movie. It's just a go of a TV show.
It feels exactly like that's what they did. And at the very least, I would say that this is probably the most interesting of the sequels we've seen so far.
It's the most disappointing of the sequels.
Oh, for sure. I think it had the most potential.
Well, so I'll say this about, since we've already done the plot, kind of going back in about certain things that bother us. One thing that bothers me about it is, in the first one, you're going to have those Milo fish out of water situations where he's in Atlantis and he's like, how does this work? And Kita's like, it works like this. And he's like, ooh, wow, that's crazy. Like, blah, blah, blah. We're doing the flip of this now, where Kita's on land and she's constantly having these conversations with Milo. Like, what is this glass cabinet? Like, what do you do with this? He's like, oh, well, you put stuff in there that you want to protect. That's of value. She's like, that's crazy. Who would steal a glass cabinet? They're trying to do all these kind of like, she's the fish out of water conversations now. But it just comes across as so like, we're just trying to fill time. We're just trying to get through this.
Which with so much plot to get through, it's like why how do they simultaneously like have time for that?
Well, they do this thing with all sequels where they take the characters that you like and they kind of bring them down to one note. So Mole he's called Mole because he's very good at digging and he's got a lot of tools for it. So in the first one, we get to see all those tools. We get to see how he digs. In this one, since we know he's a digger, they're just like, I don't want to draw the tools. Let's just have him dig with his hands. Well, he literally digs with his hands.
There is one part where, yes, he does dig through solid rock with his hands. There's so much about this movie.
He's even eating rocks now as well. He's eating rocks.
I want to talk about Mole, because Mole was very interesting, because there were certain elements where I really liked how they were working in his note into developing the plot. And having him help move the plot forward because of aspects we know about him and we're familiar with.
Yeah, he had a lot of discoveries. He discovered the boulder. He was
useful. However, they kept going at it, and there were points where they would literally start using his job just for a gag, where it was literally just killing time. And with a script like this, you just can't fucking do that.
I think they do that with Vinny too. Like Vinny's the explosion guy.
I think they do it a lot more with Vinny.
He's got a lot of intricate explosions in the first one. This one, his solution for everything is explosions.
Well, that's the way it is in the first one.
Hey, what do we do about this? I'll blow it up. Hey, what are we going to do about this? I say we blow it up. Hey, what are we going to do about this? Blow it up. And I'm just going to keep showing now 2 more times where he does that. I don't even have to say it. It explains,
But he does that in the first one too.
But they even do it with Audrey. So like my point I was saying about Audrey, about how she's so mad about her machinery, but then she flips on a dime later and it doesn't matter. She's the complainer. We need her complain. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Milo's the scientist. You be sciencey. Hida, you're all about the history. You just focus on the history. And it's exhausting.
Before we go into ranking, I just want to talk about, like, as I said before, the original had a lot of good ideas, but it was, as some people would consider, a bit of a mess of a script. With the sequel, I do think that there are a number of ideas here that are worth exploring, and it just wouldn't settle. And then we end up at Ragnarok, and it's like, how the fuck did we get here? So,
well, there's not one mission. It's 3 different missions.
Exactly.
So there's no investment emotionally at the top for anybody, because it's almost like this is like a TV show. So we just have our characters that have their one notes, and we're just going to send them on wacky missions. And they're trying to tie in the fact that these missions that they're going on are related to Atlantis aftermath.
In some way, yeah. And the big thing that I didn't like was that Kida is kind of some clunky, like, it's like clunky character rationalization. It's like we Vinny and Audrey and all of them, they think that the Kraken is related back to the Leviathan, the creature that have been guarding Atlantis. So they're coming back to Kida and saying, hey, is this another Atlantean war machine, essentially? Mm-hmm. And Kida is worried because she does think it is. What I don't like is that they tease us with that idea, because I really like that idea. And it's a very prevalent thing in science fiction, especially things like Star Trek. And they've done it in multiple episodes, is the crew stumbles upon a war machine, like a giant ship that goes around just destroying everything in its path. And they find out that it was built by a war-mongering species that's like been extinct for millennia. So it's like, it's just this war machine that has no purpose, that's just going around destroying things. And the people who had created it have no purpose for it anymore, or they're just dead.
Yeah.
And so that's an idea I really like got behind. I'm like, okay, so we're going to see like a kids show essentially explore this idea that like Star Trek does. Mm-hmm. So I kind of got excited for that.
But then.
Well, and then it doubled down. Mm-hmm. And then we get to Krakenstad. Krakenstand, whatever it's called. It reminded me very much of like an H.P. Lovecraft kind of story. He has a very distinct style, and it was very prevalent with the Volgud stuff and the Krakenstand stuff. And so I thought, okay, so with this kind of like war machine, like ancient war machine on like amok, and then having to deal with that, we're also going to deal with like some Lovecraft stuff and like the Kraken and like the like abyssal horror kind of stuff that he deals with.
So now that we've kind of exhausted talking about this, we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but now we can kind of get into the ranking of this. So as always on this podcast, we kind of break down these sequels into 3 kind of questions. And the first question is, does it work as a sequel? You probably have more to say about this than I do, so I'll just kind of start off. For me, this does not work as a sequel. The reason why is because it's so obvious from the first frame that this is a TV movie, or this is almost 3 episodes of a show, and it's just not, it's not a sequel to me. it's not a sequel to me. So for those reasons, the fact that it just doesn't feel like there's actual intention behind telling a story here or continuing a story, it doesn't work as a sequel for me.
It doesn't work as a sequel for me. It doesn't tell the right story, and especially discussing Atlantis' return, its return to the surface, and whether that should take place at the beginning or the end of the story. I think a true sequel, that event would have had to take place at the beginning, and then the movie would have had to have been about something else.
Yeah.
What this movie is about is not what the original movie was about, even though it introduces, I would say, similar concepts of equal interest or intrigue. They're just not the same themes.
Yeah. So the second one is going to be, is it enjoyable? Once again, for me, it is not enjoyable. I paused this movie 4 times. I did not like the look of it. I wasn't invested in any of the characters. And it's just like, I was very happy when it was over. I could see maybe a kid enjoying it, but only if he's just really young and he just need to put something on. But for me, it's not enjoyable.
I think it's enjoyable enough just on the ideas it introduces alone. And just kind of how it deals with ideas like weapon of mass destruction run amok, these kind of like the idea of the deities that it plays with, and like the crystal, like it was really unusual in the first one, but it was also very glossed over because the immediate threat was I can't remember his name, Rourke. The immediate threat was Rourke and the who possessed the power. In this movie, they actually explore the nature of that power a little bit more, and it's interesting, if not well executed.
It's just not well executed for me. Exactly. I think it's interesting, but you have to be interested in what you're telling.
Yeah.
Right. The third one, which we just introduced this question on our last episode. We kind of touched about it on the first one, but does this movie need to exist? Personally, I don't think this movie needs to exist. I agree that it has good concepts, but it does not execute those concepts well. So therefore, it's just like, it doesn't need to exist. It doesn't bring anything to the table. You know, if you're not going to do it, then don't do it. But if you're going to do it, don't half-ass it.
I agree. The thing is, it's playing with interesting ideas, but it's not really bringing anything new to the table. These ideas aren't new, even though they are interesting, and they're not explored in any unique way. They're barely explored at all, honestly. The script really just does seem more focused on just trying to keep itself together more than exploring anything insofar as like a theme or an idea goes. So that's definitely a no for me.
Yeah. And if you're now keeping the tally, now we're on our kind of final thing, which is it worth going back again? And if you're keeping track at home, that is 5 X's and 1 check mark. So unfortunately, this movie is going to get 1 giant X as not worth going back again. There's obviously elements to it that if you were a fan, like you said, and you want to go to it, you might get something out of it. But the overall experience was not worth it.
For me, it was worth it, but not enjoyable.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else you really want to say about this movie before we kind of wrap it up?
I really did just want to say that, like, one last thing I wanted was that if you did start it with Atlantis Rising and just kind of playing with what that world would look like and what a story like that could kind of like be, you have a built-in enemy because the Germans would be the Germans. There is that line in the first movie, which is like the whole idea is they're American characters, so like we can't let this. The one thing is the Germans can't get this. Like even if Rourke's gonna sell it to like a dictator somewhere, the Germans cannot get it. So it would kind of been interesting to have seen like, okay, now let's introduce like a German character. Let's get the war involved. And let's kind of see what happens now that Atlantis has a hand at the world stage.
Well, either way, this has been... what's the name of this freaking movie again? This has been...
Milo's Return!
Well, anyway, so this has been Atlantis 2, Milo's Return. Overall, not great, but we got through it. As always, if you have anything to add that we missed, or if there's anything we messed up, feel free to comment below. Feel free to check out our other episodes. We've done Aladdin, King of Thieves so far, and we did Little Mermaid 2.
Return to the Sea.
Return to the Sea. And I think outside of that, we'll see you here again, back again on the Back Again Sequel podcast. Right, Drew?
That's right.
All right. We'll see you next time.